people think that content creators have a lot of power over the game, and they have zero. Like, they have zero. The only person with any semblance of control over things is Mark, and he hasn't got as much as people think.
When I did the Sol vs Solio series, I thoroughly enjoyed having the opportunity to discuss FPL strategy with some of the greatest minds in the game. I wanted to keep the conversations going and to expand them out from the projection model debate into wider FPL discussion, so as to make them sustainable in the longer term. I can't think of anyone better to transition the conversations into a broader discussion with than BlackBox has. When he invited me onto his channel earlier in the season, it was one of the most enjoyable 2 hours of my life. He is someone I hold in the highest esteem, and to get him onto my channel for this conversation is something I am very grateful for. In the next 2 hours, we cover a whole range of topics, from the projection models to our struggles this season, his relationships in the game, how he has found the evolution of the black box, and how to maintain our love for the game at the times when it does not love us back. Nothing was off the table, and Az answered all the tough questions asked of him. The 2 hours of filming absolutely flew by for me, and I hope you enjoy listening to them as much as I enjoyed recording them. So, without any further ado, let's get into it with the main man himself. So, today on the FPL Nightmare channel, we have a very special guest indeed. This man is one of the most respected veterans of the FPL scene, with a history in the game which includes 4 top 5k ranks and a personal best of 817th in the world. But that's not all, no. He is a pioneer in the FPL content scene, one of the key figures in transitioning FPL analysis from what has happened to why it has happened, and how to use that information to better analyse the future and where the game may go. He is one of the game's deepest thinkers, reflecting his educational background as both a psychology master of research and a doctor of philosophy. This man can evaluate why our decisions go wrong as much as anyone in the FPL space, and he understands better than most what we can learn from the past and how we can apply it to the future. There is nobody better at analysing the wreckage of a season than this man, and how we can evolve our playstyle to emerge from that wreckage better, stronger and more equipped for the future. And more importantly than all that, he is a thoroughly decent man. He is the reason the iconic Mark Sutherns felt able to return to the content creation field. He is always prepared to stick his head above the parapet to defend the values he holds dearest. He is open and honest about how the game affects him on an emotional level in a way which inspires others to confront their own emotions. This man changed the way we look at the game from a statistical perspective, an analytical perspective and an emotional perspective, and it is an honour to have him on the channel. Ladies and gentlemen, this is BlackBox Az. Thank you for coming on today, mate. How are you doing?
What a hyping up, man. I'm going to take you wherever I go and have that. That was awesome. I'm good. Thank you for having me. It is an absolute honour to be here. I've obviously followed your channel for ages and was lucky enough to have you on BlackBox a couple of months ago, and yeah, nice to return the favour.
You were very lucky to have me on the BlackBox, because I don't go on many other channels, mainly because nobody invites me. But no, I really enjoyed that night as well. It was a lot of fun, and you know, it's quite weird because like I'd done a couple of live streams of my own to like 100 people, and I'd done the FPL pubcast with, you know, up at that point up to about 150 people, and then I come on the BlackBox and we're seeing 1,000 people in the live chat, and I'm like, you know, thriving on it, to be honest with you.
I think it was one of our best ones, honestly. I think it was one of the best late tackles we've ever done. I absolutely loved that episode, and it was just after your, like, the worst week you've ever had in FPL, right?
Yeah, I'd captained Anthony Gordon to a red card, 9.8 million rank. And it's like, what can you do? And of course, I made a tit of myself getting all emotional about Isaac, and you know, now he's broken his leg, and I just feel sad for the lad, to be honest with you. I still hope he comes out and apologises so we can all get back to remembering what a great player he was. But today's not about Alexander Isak. It is about BlackBox as, and there is a lot I want to discuss with you today. So let's get straight into it. I know that, like me, you are exploring the projection model programs to see how they can evolve your strategy. I see you in the Solio Discord asking the questions and trying to learn. Before we get into why you are beginning to engage with these programs, first, could you explain what your FPL strategy generally has been in the past and how it has evolved over the 19 years you have been playing the game?
19 years, wow, that is that is a long time. Well, I guess when it started out, there wasn't really anything, right? There was just watching matches, you know, making decisions based on what you saw and chatting to friends, and that was kind of it. I got into Scout probably in my second year of playing or third year of playing, and realised there was way more to it than that. You know, even the articles that were written on there, like set piece takers, who's taking free kicks, who's taking penalties, that is information that I think a lot of people don't consider when they're just picking an initial squad. And obviously the deeper you get into it, the more you learn about, you know, XG as it has come out lately, about projected points, all the different metrics that are now staple. I've sort of slowly seen them come in drips and drabs and use different ones at different times. But I mean, I used to be all about the vibes. I think it was pure, you know, grass FC manager. I watched the game. Did I like the player? And if I did, I'd get them in. But before I started doing BlackBox, I realised that wasn't really enough anymore, because these tools are developed so far. We needed to be more aware of stats and things like that. And I made that jump at a good time, but I don't think I took the next level up, which I think is analytics. And I think your series with you know, Sol versus Solio is exactly where I've been sort of fluctuating between over the last few years. So yeah, like you said, it's time to evolve and try some new things.
Well, that answers the second question I was going to ask you, which was about how the data and the depth of information has affected your strategies over the years. Yeah, like, why do you think the analytic models are the answer? You know, in fact, I'll rephrase that into a much better one, because I've actually got a question written about that. On the BlackBox recently, you were quite despondent about your season performance and your results in the 3 years since your finish of 4,054th in 2022. I found the conversation you had with Luke about projection models quite fascinating, especially your openness to engaging with these programs now in a way you haven't in the past. What I found the most interesting is that a person like yourself, with your professional background and with your history and reputation for analysis, that you haven't used these programs to any real degree up until now. Why is that, and what is it about this moment in particular which has opened you up to the projection models?
I think the conversation I had with Luke was a bit of a game changer, really, because he is someone who I've podded with a lot over the years. You know, when we started doing Scoutcast together, Luke was one of the first people that I was doing that with. I know him really well. You could not get a more grass FC manager than Luke back in the day. He was Mr. I will just bring in, you know, Seamus Coleman and captain him and hope for the best. You know, that was his whole play style. And he went through quite a period of not doing so well in the ranks, and has now realised there's other ways to play the game, and he plays analytics, you know, and uses those tools a lot more than I ever thought he would. The conversation was great with him because it made me realise, it's not just about clicking a button and getting the answer and picking that. And I think when you talk to your episode with Trout, I think was a real eye opener with that, because that is what Solio is all about. It's about entering your own thoughts and helping that influence your decision making rather than just pressing solve and going with the first answer. I think that's why I've always pushed back about it so much, because what's the point of that? That's not a game. If you're doing that, it's just it's like copying a content creator. It's exactly the same as watching FPL Harry. I'll just do whatever transfer he's doing that week, and I mean, I'll probably do quite well because he's, you know, one of the best there is. But that never interested me. I'd rather stop playing than do that. It just doesn't interest me at all. But what he's saying about the different paths and using it to check your decision making and evaluate decisions. And I think what was most interesting was when he said, because he talks about the emotion, that's something I've been struggling with a lot lately. And actually what the analytics gives you is it gives you a sense of, okay, well, was this decision a good one or a bad one? And that's what I like about it. What I don't want it to do is for it to just eliminate the idea that you can make mistakes. And I think that was a problem I had quite early on with some of the analytics crowd. And believe me, I'm not perfect. I'm terrible on Twitter and everyone's got their flaws. But I got into a lot of arguments with people because I felt that analytics was, I'm right, you're wrong, whatever happens, I'm right. And that's the end of it.
Yeah.
So I don't think analytics is perfect because I think it still undervalues players like Rodgers, like Rice, when some of these stats, don't fit or the criteria isn't met. But at the same time, it does give you a lot more tools to have a better season.
It does overvalue players a lot as well, especially penalty takers. Like Dominic Szoboszlai at the minute is, you can tell who is a projection model user by whether or not they've got Szoboszlai in the team, because to somebody that watches the games and looks at the goals and assists, there's just nothing there, really. He's shunted around the pitch. He's right back, he's right wing, he's central midfielder, he's all over the spot. He's not getting the goals or assists, and yet, like, the projection models absolutely love Szoboszlai, and it's I find that quite interesting. Like when I'm watching all this content, and I do watch an awful lot of content, because it's like the more like I get to know people in the community, the more I feel like I have to watch the content, and I want to watch the content as well, because certainly for me at this stage of my kind of journey into the projection models and the analytics programs, it's important for me to take these new kind of voices in as much as like my pals and the ones that I've been watching over the years. But yeah, it's just interesting to see how much they actually influence, even more than people would like. People assume that they do, but they don't realize how much. But it's interesting to me. But what I've been using Solio for recently is I'll figure out my own plan on FPL.team. I'm very old school in FPL.team, Peter from Colombia, I think.
Legend.
Yeah, and I like promoting these kind of free tools that people have created for us. And so I'll work out my plan on that, and then I'll go to Solio and I'll run a solve, and then I'll get like another thread and I'll put my own plan in, and I'll see how closely the scores align, if that makes sense. So like I did it for the next 5 weeks, and Solio's was like 312 points or something, and mine was 310 points or 308 points or something. And it might not be the optimal team, but it's my team, and it's not that far away from what the projections say. And I find that a much more engaging way to use these programs, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, there's two moments of my season this year which I think has helped shift me towards that idea. One is my absolutely awful transfers. I think after the episode we did, I bought in Gibbs White and Ilanga as two free transfers, and
don't subtly blame me for your bad decisions.
You told me to get Ilang. I'm kind of hold you solely responsible, but there's no way that the model would have told me to get those players, because they don't fit the criteria that make a good FPL asset. Their stats were poor penalty, no penalties between them, because Chris Wood was in the team at the time. There wasn't enough data to suggest they would be good picks. It was more just a hit and hope and a punt, and it went terribly. And I think if I'd used a model to check that, been like, okay, I want to get in these two players, let's do what you do and check it against other things. Oh my God, the projected points are so far beyond. Yeah. And that's what I like what Trout talks about. He says he's happy to take a risk as long as it's within a certain threshold of points. And that is a good way of sense checking your own logic. The other example that I like is the whole Ekatike inverts thing, because again, I went against Solio with that. I looked at that and it had projected points, Ekatike inverts, like bang on the same points. And I was like, no way. Ekatike is so far ahead of Verts. But look what's happened. Two double-digit hauls for Verts, and the injury to Ekatike is unlucky, you can say. But there wasn't a lot in it between them, and it's been proved right. And I'm sure there's like countless examples of when our own biases influence more than when you just look at the cold, hard facts that are presented on that thing. So it's definitely a good thing to start using.
I will give a shout out to my man Nick Trigger at this moment, because he was very adamant not to get Ekatike in, because not because of the projection models, but because of how it disrupts your squad structure.
Yep.
You know, like you're making 2 transfers to get Ekatike in up front, and then if something goes wrong, you've got to make 2 transfers to get it back. So he went with Wirtz for that reason, as, you know, backed up by Solio as well. And he's obviously been proven correct. And, I do think this is important in the kind of projection model era, that we do remember some of the golden rules, if you will, you know, like about prioritizing squad structure over like the kind of quick fix sort of thing. And this actually ties me into the next question, which is one of the philosophies behind the black box is that, much like following a plane crash, we turn to the black box to analyse and understand what went wrong so that we can learn from the failure and emerge stronger for the future. And when I look at your rank history, what I find most interesting is how there is a clear pattern which reflects this philosophy. You started playing in 2007 and it took you 4 years to achieve that first top 5k ranking. There was a regression the following season, and then you finished just outside the top 10k, and 2 years later you achieved your second top 5k ranking. Then again, there was a regression for 2 years, albeit one which still yielded excellent results. And then in 2018, 3 seasons after your second top 5k ranking, you achieved your personal best finish of 817th. But once again, there was 3 seasons of relative regression, though still with a top 18k finish, before you finished 4,054th in 2022. Yet, following that excellent finish 3 seasons ago, the drop-off has been more severe, with your worst ever finish of 446,000 in 2024, finishing outside the top 250k last season, and your struggles this season, which have seen you take until game week 20 to get inside the top 2.5 million. Though the elite finish and drop-off cycle has continued, the fall has been much more severe in the last few seasons than in the past. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, well, I think the obvious answer for what has been going on, I think, has been, if you look at all of my years of ranking history compared to recently, what has been the one major thing that's happened since I got all these pretty crappy ranks? Started doing BlackBox, right? So you said the reason I set it up was to prevent this. It was to learn from mistakes and stop doing stupid things and be a better FPL manager. You know, exactly what the models are trying to teach us to do. It's like, don't worry about what's happened, you know, necessarily in the past, but you can learn from, don't bring in players like Elanga, don't bring in stupid players, don't punt on players, pick proven, you know, good assets. The template's there for a reason. You don't need to go against it every week, all of that stuff. I haven't done that, because what I've done and what I've come to learn is that I have put the channel and content on a higher pedestal than actually just playing the game in a sensible way. And the question is, like, do I regret doing that? Like, I'm really proud of like what Mark and I built with BlackBox. I think we created something which was like quite a community driven channel, and we were there when we were both like writing. I mean, Mark had a season like mine. He was like 3 million after like 20 weeks or something like that, but he'd still turn up and do it.
That happened to the best of us. You know,
absolutely.
Last season, there was loads of people, you know, like there was I think all of the FPL Wire lads, apart from Praz, were in the 2 millions for ages. There was Marco Ujala. He's one of the best managers in the history of the game, and he was like 2.8 million, and FPL Salah as well, he was really struggling. And you know, and lots of people certainly in recent years have been struggling later into the season, because there's always that sense that the early weeks that people use all the chips, and like the more experienced manager will fall behind because they're building for the longer term, and then they'll get it back, but it is taking longer to get it back. So,
yeah, I mean, when you look at like, all the top streamers like Harry, Raptor, Focal, Mate, all these guys, Andy, they're all doing solo streams. So they can bring in a player, they can get excited about it. But I think there's something different about having a channel where you're with someone every week and the highs are higher because you're celebrating together, or you're in a battle together like Mark and I were for so many years. The lows are lower because you're like, oh, Mark, you didn't bring in Haaland and he got a hat-trick against Forest. He's like, oh, I know. Whereas if you're doing it on your own, it's a bit different because you just sort of talk about it and then you move on. So I think the channel became something that Mark and I talked about it a lot. We didn't want to be the same we don't want to make the same moves as everyone else, because it's like, well, what's the point? You can go watch 10 other streamers if they're bringing in Salah and captaining him, brilliant. Well, what if one of us goes rogue and does this? And I think a lot of it wasn't conscious decision making. I don't think we were deliberately being different for the sake of it, but I think we both pushed against template moves a lot and tried to find any excuse not to bring in the players that everyone else was bringing in every week. And it doesn't work because template players are template for a reason, because they're normally good players.
It's interesting you say that, because you're messing with my format here, because I was going to ask you about this very situation later on. But I'll jump to that question now. I know that for me, the more invested I get in my YouTube channel and my rivalries on the FPL Pubcast with Gary and Nick Trigger and FPL D Unit, Kanzi and Roberto, the more I factor in what would be more interesting for the viewer, rightly or wrongly. Like if we're all going Haaland, there's always that thing to, maybe I can be the charismatic one that goes for a Gabriel captaincy this week, or captains Anthony Gordon against Liverpool for a red card, and rightly or wrongly, I mean, maybe you shouldn't do that, but I would argue it's almost impossible not to, and that these kind of dilemmas play out in personal mini leagues all over the world in similar ways. Like if you, like you say with Mark, like if I meet up with my mates down the pub and we're talking about the game, well, like if one of us says, oh, I'm going to captain whoever, and I'm already captaining him, I'll be like, oh, you don't want to do that. You're just copying me. Yeah, you're just copying me. And there is that, there is that factor to it. And when you're doing it on YouTube, like, I feel like that's even more amplified, to me. But also, like, we can't deny it. The more interesting you are, the more, like, random rad stuff you do, the more people want to watch, I mean, I'd like to caveat that, like, this isn't, I'm not trying to make excuses here. I'm aware that I haven't played the game well. I think I've been unlucky with a lot of different things. Like Calvert-Lewin this year, I bring him in, I get 6 blanks from him, and then he goes on a 7-match goal to a run. I mean, come on, something like that is quite unlucky. But I've made bad decisions and I've not played the game in a particularly good way over the years. And, it catches up to you in the end. But yeah, I do think that it's like, we come to the end of BlackBox. I'm talking to Mark. I look at his team and he's like, yeah, I'm going to bring in, Sterling this week. And I was thinking of bringing in Sterling that week. But now I'm like, well, no, I don't want to bring in Sterling now. The whole world's going to think I'm copying Mark.
Yeah, they're going to think I'm copying Mark, or we're going to end up with this. I mean, there was one episode we did where I think we had 10 out of 11 the same players. And I remember us both just thinking, this is lame. This isn't a good advert for the game. If we're, playing the game differently or trying to play the game differently, we've got different styles, different FPL management techniques, and we've ended up with pretty much exactly the same team. So, do you remember that week when I think everyone wildcarded and literally everyone had like 10 out of 11 of the same players? And I think there was the points on live FPL. Everyone had like 47 points.
Was that this season or last season?
No, this was a couple of years ago.
Last season, everyone did it in game week 6 because I made a video about it.
Yeah,
and I was calling them all out. And I recorded my video and I said, just you watch, FPL Harry will do it. And this is FPL Harry's current team, and it's absolutely perfect. And he'll wildcard into it. And Big Andy, he sold Salah for Saka just so he had an excuse to wildcard Salah back in, because people don't want to be too different.
Dunk on Sir Winks.
What? Oh,
remember
yes.
That from
yes.
Dunk on Sir Winks. Yeah. The thing is, I get it. Like, again, I'm not trying to have a badge. I mean, Harry has spoken, very openly about how he plays FPL, and he plays FPL to not have a bad week.
Yeah,
that's what he's spoken about. He said he will set his team up every week so that it will find it very hard to get a substantial red arrow. So you've got Trout playing with ultimate risk on solo, and you've got Harry playing with very low risk. And Harry does very, very well because he's not clouded by everything else that's going on, trying to bring in clever players. He's got a good reputation. He doesn't need to stand out. He just needs to be a good player of the game. But I think that luxury is, well, a luxury for a lot of people. I think if you're making your own content, if you're trying to stand out, you can't just do that. You can't just bring in the same players. You've got to try and pick someone a bit different, and sometimes it pays off. And some of my best FPL moments have been when I've picked players that have gone against what other people are doing, and that is why I play the game. But this season was about sort of resetting and just trying to get a decent, respectable finish and then carrying from there. And it's just been a complete disaster. So it just shows there's no silver bullet to think. You can try and play the game in a certain way that you think will yield great results. And football has a way of making a mockery of that. So it's a tricky game. There's a lot of luck involved.
It's a very difficult game, and people forget that. And like, we're competing against, I think, about 13 million people. I mean, your odds of winning the lottery are similar.
Yeah.
1 in 13 million or whatever, you're 1 in 14 million for the lottery. It's very difficult. And especially when you've got people who, do use projection models to aid the performance. Again, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I don't think it is anymore. Like, what I've found with the projections is, like, on the website, the FPL website, you have the FDR for the teams, and I find the projections as being almost like an FDR for individual players. And when I look at it like that, it makes it seem a lot less. It's like, well, I don't feel guilty anymore, because if it says, Haaland's projected for 8 points, that's just like a 1 on the FDR, whereas Foden might be projected for 5.5 points. That's maybe a 2 on the FDR. And that's the way I look at it. And, sometimes, because they're never going to predict a 20-point haul, they're never going to say, Eze is going to get 20 points here. But, with like a Haaland, they'll predict an FDR score, projection score of that's high enough that you think, well, he's got a good haul potential here. And, I do think that the work better than that. But what I would say, to go back a little bit, is that you've shown in the past with, this cycle that I laid out for you. You have a top 5k finish and it takes you a few years, and then you get another one and it takes you a few years. Why do you doubt your ability to do that this time without the models?
Yeah, good. I mean, doubt ability is, I'm not sure that is completely what's happening. I mean, you can become, we're going to talk about the emotions a bit later. You can become down on yourself after things don't work out and you're struggling down at 3 million. And it's interesting, the change in how, like, some of my interactions now are very different to how they were like 5 years ago. When I had a lot of good finishes, you're sort of on top of the world, everyone's coming to you for advice and everything like that. And now, like, rightly, I get quite a lot of like ribbing. Some of it very like well-intentioned, others like completely like out of order, I think. But the general sense is, Az is a bit of has-been. He's finished. He's he can't make the calls that he used to make and all that. And that's fine. Like, I don't mind that, because I know that it can come in cycles. Like Harry. And again, Harry will admit to this. I mean, if you believe in like variance, you look at luck and you look at all these things. I mean, there's the models are very good at telling you, this is what we predicted. You were here. You had so much luck on your side according to our projections that you finished 1k when you should have finished about 250k. And they're horrible things to look at sometimes, because you think, oh, okay, I've been a bit lucky there. But a lot of the time you can look at it and go, well, I finished 2 million, but actually, according to the projections, I should have finished like 15k.
Yeah.
And then that's quite a nice way of using it, because I can see why people look at that and think, okay, maybe I haven't made as many bad decisions as I have. It's just come down to the luck. Like,
well, with the variance, like the one thing I keep coming back to is Adam from Above Average, when he talked about his mates in the mini league, and they had a 6-point projected difference and a 169-point actual difference, and it's just wild, like absolutely wild. Now, I'm not saying you should be doubting yourself. That wasn't what I was meaning by that. I'm
too stubborn to doubt myself, I think. As soon as I start doing that, again, I think that's when I would just start using the models to do my moves for me. And then it's what's the point? I think what I like the models for is giving you a bit of a base to say, Szoboszlai is a good example, right? Because the models are so hot on like Cunha, Szoboszlai, Bruno Fernandes. Bruno Fernandes, I wasn't too sure about. I was completely wrong on that. He's an absolutely unbelievable pick. And when you think about it, okay, he's got so many different routes to points, fine. Cunha, I wasn't too sure about, but I really like Cunha, and I wanted to give the models a chance to impress me.
Anymore.
No, well, he's gone after this week. But then I look at Szoboszlai, and I'm exactly the same as you. I'm like, I have absolutely zero interest in buying Szoboszlai. He could be factored into every single solve that Solo puts out. Review has got him high as well.
He is. Yeah. You have to block him, and even then, it still puts him in.
I know, but I'm just like no. Whereas if I had lost faith, I would just be like, do you know what? I'm just going to get Szoboszlai. If the models are telling me to do it, I should probably just do it. So it's still about picking your battles and going with your opinion. I mean, I don't think it's any contest that Bruno Fernandes is a much, much better than Szoboszlai. And Cunha's probably somewhere in the middle. It was obviously boosted by the fact Fernandes is out. Whereas I think they've all been equally weighted on the models at different times because of the circumstance and things like that. Not to say they're wrong, but I still back myself because when I give advice to people, the advice tends to be pretty good. I just don't do the bloody thing in my own team, which I bet you could say the same for yourself as well. What everyone says, right?
What I would say is, though, like with that sort of thing, we always remember the good things that we say that didn't come off, whereas we kind of forget the bad things. Like,
there are bad things.
My mate D-Unit, he'll tell you, oh, here's 20 different players who might be a good captain. And then, like, he'll get one of them will come in. He'll be like, oh, I called it. The D-Unit called it. And it's like, well, yeah, but you also called 19 that blanked there. I think that is something that we all do, certainly as content creators, because, I mean, it is a competition as well, because we are competing for people's time. And, like, I don't know about you, certainly for me, like, I feel like it's been a bit bizarre for me, really, because I'm having my worst season ever, and like my views are going up. But people love the pain. They love it.
People love the pain. They really
it's like
do.
On your match of the day challenge when was it Mark had sold a hat trick or something.
We had the one with Ferran Torres when he sold the 20-pointer from Ferran Torres. But I think our most watched one was when neither of us had Haaland, and he was like, and he scored a hat trick against. I think he scored a hat trick against Forest, and we both captained Salah, and he blanked in a 9-0. Good times,
classic. But this is the thing. This is like what people relate to, because sometimes what I find is before. Like, I find with my previews that they generally don't do the same sort of numbers as my reactions, and I think it's because I don't have that authority of the history of an FPL Harry or yourself or, countless others that have got, Praz with that countless history of top 10K, top 5K finishes. So people are less inclined for that advice, but the reactions, the emotions, I think it's one of my strengths is relaying them to an audience, and yourself as well. Like, I feel like you're open in a way a lot of people aren't, and I think people want strong opinions, and I think people pretend that they don't, and I think people pretend they just want you to finish really highly and all that. But I think when you're watching content, you want people. I don't want to use TalkSport as an example, right? But the reason why TalkSport does so well is because you've got someone like Rory Jennings giving like absolute ridiculous takes on things, and then that gets clickbait and things like that. But like what we do is a much better version of that, because we're true to I'd like to think we're true to ourselves in terms of we don't pick 20 people that we think are right. And I don't want to I'm not calling D-Unit out on that, but there's other people who might post and say, they mention 20 players, one of them does well, they retweet the tweet where they post about them. I don't really think we do that. I think we're quite hot on certain players, and we're quite open if that player doesn't perform, and we go, okay, do you know what? I got that completely wrong. Fair enough. Yeah. But if they do well, then we don't need to celebrate it because other people have watched it and they sort of remember it.
And that's what I like. You don't need to sort of, beat your own drum, do you?
No, I agree. I feel like when you're constantly going on about the things you've got right, it's a sign of insecurity.
I completely agree. Yeah.
But I get it as well, because it's an insecure economy, YouTube, because it's very short term, very, very TikTok. It's TikTok FPL almost, in the sense that people will watch you and then they'll move on to the next, just like that. And if you stop making it, people probably won't care that much. So maybe for you it would be different. The people that have been around longer, but if I stopped making videos, I don't think people would really miss me all that much. Maybe
I would.
Well, I'd be texting you every day. Let's get me back on the BlackBox.
Get me on the BlackBox.
Keep me relevant.
It's bin Andy off. Bin Andy and Luke off. Get you on full time. That's the dream.
I like Andy North. I think he's underrated. I do.
I won't tell him that. I'll go to his head.
I did like that watch along. I took a screenshot and he was just sat there with a proper smug face, and your head was in your hands, and it was so good. I do like him. But that Luke, I had not really come across him until this season, really, and when he was on your channel more regularly, and he's so good. He's so interesting.
We had a podcast which we called Top Gun, and the idea of that was that we were both self-proclaimed mavericks of the game. We were making crazy decisions and everything like that.
It's silly goose.
Well, we used to argue a lot about which one of us was goose and which one of us was. But he was maverick, because he would do. I've always played the game in a slightly left field way, but not like template ratings on live FPL. I'm not 20%, 30%. I'm still 60%, but I like a different captain pick, or going for someone a bit rogue. Whereas Luke was mad with it. He was. I would say he was the number one person in the community for picking crazy players, and a lot of the time they didn't come off, but a lot of the time they did come off, and that's how we like to play. It was fun, but he reached a point with it where he just wasn't enjoying it as much because he wasn't finishing very well. And I think that's kind of the point I've come to now, is that I just want to get back to doing all right again. And I'm in a quite privileged position, because I've obviously had the following for a while. I got in very early with all this stuff. If I wasn't in that position, I probably would be celebrating all my wins and trying to build myself up as being, oh, look, I know what I'm doing. I do. But yeah, I don't really feel like I need to do that, because whatever, you can watch it or not. I don't really mind at this point.
Well, send all your viewers to me. I'll take them live. But no. But on that, do you think where when you analyse what makes a great FPL manager, how does use of projection models affect that kind of analysis, affect that conversation? If we'll use Luke as an example. If he got 4K now and he had 4K 10 years ago, which one's the better achievement?
It's a very good question. I mean, the FPL manager that I respect, there's a lot of respect. Someone like Fabio Borges, absolutely ridiculous. Villaronca's back, back playing again. Absolute legend of the game. These people. But I think probably the person I respect most of all people is Simon March, who won it in, I don't know when it was, 2013, 2014, but then managed to have successive really high finishes after that. Yeah, and I don't think we're going to see that kind of that. We haven't really seen that happen before or since. Someone wins the game, it tends to be very lucky. There's someone who haven't historically done very well and they do well. I think last year there was an analytics manager that won it and was using that. And I wouldn't dream of year before. I wouldn't dream of saying that them using analytics means it's less of a. It's any less, because you still got to make the moves and you can't just follow analytics. Because if you follow the top line every week, there would be 5,000 people that would all finish first, join first. So they've obviously done something that's different to what it's saying to them every week. So I personally, it's two things, right? It's a much bigger player base, so it's more impressive to win it now. But I also think it was more impressive to win it back then because you had less tools and information available to you. So I don't really know the answer to your question. I sort of put them about the same, even though the obvious thing is to say it's more impressive to win it now. I think someone like Simon, who managed to finish high and then consecutive finish really, really high after winning it, deserves a lot of credit, because that is really tough to do without tools. Or at least as advanced tools as we've got now.
Yeah. What are your thoughts about content creators who base their decisions heavily around the projection models, but then act as though they've come to these decisions independently rather than openly discussing the use of the models?
It's a very leading question, Andrew, isn't it?
I'm not referring to anyone in particular, although I have commented on a couple of people on my recent videos. But I mean, I will preface by saying I don't think it's a bad thing. And in many ways, I think it's even more impressive that knowing they're going to get criticised so much for doing it, they're still showing like that kind of the mental strength to say, you know, I would say it's almost a humble thing. I would say if you think you can beat the models, there's an element of ego involved. And if you say, I'm going to accept that I don't understand why, but this is what this model says, so I'm going to trust that, I would say that's actually maybe even a more humble approach than saying I can beat it by myself. And obviously there are contractual obligations in certain circumstances as well. And, you know, like there's people that will discuss these programs on other platforms that they maybe won't on the platforms that are sponsored by other programs. I feel like I'm making a mess of this, what I'm trying to say here. You know what I mean?
I know.
You?
Well, it's what I was going to say. I mean, in answer to your question, I think, you know, if you look at it surface level,
I'll rephrase it. If I became the world number one and all I was doing was copying what Solio said, but I was completely refusing to acknowledge Solio's existence, how would that affect your perception of me?
Well, I think surface level, really badly, right? Because you're using something that someone's developed and you're not giving it credit, and it's helped you achieve something, and you're getting plaudits and praise and an iPad and 3 tickets to go see the Premier League show based on...
Give me that stress ball.
Give me that stress ball, yes. You know, based on something that you haven't really earned because you've used something. It depends how much if you press solve, you know, top solve every week and that's it, and then you're going on pods and you're talking about all these great decisions you're making, then it's difficult to justify. But I do think the contractual stuff is another element, and a lot of people are fed up with content creators, and they're fed up with how the FPL space is and how it's changed and evolved. And I do get it, because again, I'm not going to get into specifics, but there are people out there who are using something like FPL Review and not talking about using FPL Review because contractually they can't, because they've got other priorities and other things. I mean, it's obvious when you look at the moves they're making and what it's suggesting and all other factors. And the obvious thing is to say, you know, that's terrible, but in a way, I understand it, because you know you've got finances tied into certain things, and you can't always make that move. The bigger question is it good that the space has gone into that way, and that, you know, people have to feel like they have to do that and things. I mean, it's just life, isn't it? Like, unfortunately, that is how FPL has become. You know, it has become like that.
Yeah.
I don't think it's gonna change. I think it's a shame that FPL isn't the innocent game really that it was 20 years ago, and you can't just wish it was like that, because it's moved on. Like, in an ideal world, we probably wouldn't have projection models, and everyone would just pick based on stats and pick based on the eye test and enjoy it in the same way that we did. But those days are gone, so you sort of need to adapt to it. And I don't think you can really hold people to, you know, you can't really be too horrible about people who are doing things in certain ways because of contractual stuff that they've got. So I get it. Would I want to do it? Is another question. I mean, if I started using a tool which, say, Scout had banned and said I can't use, and I was using it every week to make my decisions, I would really struggle with that.
Yeah,
personally, and I'd have to make a call about whether I felt that was worth it. To still be sponsored by Scout and do all the Scout stuff. If I physically couldn't talk about something that I really believed in, I would probably just stop doing content altogether, I think.
What would happen? Like, you've probably got more experience with this than me, but what would happen if I was being sponsored by, Scout, for example, and then I started saying, the thing I'm using all the time is Solio, and Solio is what is informing my decisions, and then I use the Scout spreadsheet to keep track of them. Like, what would Scout do? I feel like actually naming Scout as the example in that is perhaps a bit unfair, but like, what would a company do, if you were to do something like that?
If in this example, are you contractually associated with Scout?
Say there was a company, FPLAnswers.com. We'll do that. And FPLAnswers.com offered me a contract that is comparable to Scout or Hub or any of these other websites that may or may not exist.
Yeah.
And they said, you can't talk about other things, you can't promote other things. And then I went on and said, look, I am contracted to FPLAnswers.com, but what I'm also using is Solio because I think it's wonderful and it's actually had such a big impact on my performance. What would FPLAnswers.com do? Could they sue me?
Well, I don't think they'd sue you, but they would, depending on how much they valued the partnership, they would probably look to terminate it, right? Like, it's the same as if I was sponsored by Nike and I was like wearing Reebok trainers on a stream and I was like, look how great these Reebok trainers are. They're so comfortable. Like, Nike is good, but Reebok, that is really they are really the brand. Like, Nike would call you up and be like, you obviously can't talk about Reebok on your stream, you lunatic. Like, take that down immediately. So it's I think a lot of the space is difficult because I think different companies have got different views on what is a competitor and what isn't, and what is a competitor to Scout versus what isn't is difficult because, like, Scout to me is about manually using tools to, like, the stats tables, custom tables, it's articles. I mean, the editorial team at Scout, are just unbelievable. Like, I've worked there for years. I know Neil really well. Obviously, when David was there and all the people they've got, the articles are the best. They are the best fantasy football articles on the market, like without a doubt. And a lot of the tools are still really, really good, but I don't think they do compare at the moment to something like Solio or Review. That's my honest thoughts on it. If you're looking for that sort of thing, and that doesn't mean everyone is. Doesn't mean everyone is looking for a projection model where you can solve lines. A lot of people are happy just to read articles or watch videos or use custom tables and stats. So it's a bit of a murky area as to, are these tools actually direct competitors to Scout, or can they be used alongside? That's not my decision to make. That's the decision to make of whoever's owning these companies to decide whether that is or isn't the case. And it's a difficult one because if you ban your people from talking about tools, I think it makes your content less engaging. It makes it less relevant to what's actually happening in the space. It makes it look like you're quite far behind the times when other things are developing. But at the same time, you obviously don't want to direct paying customers to other sites and lose those subscriptions. So I'm glad I don't have to make that decision because I think it's a balancing act.
I suppose as well for like the content creators as well, if they start saying, I'm using FPL Review, then people might stop watching them and just spend like 2 seconds to click a button.
Exactly. So, yeah, because there could be people watching videos who don't know what these tools are, and then when they learn about them, they go, well, okay, I'm going to switch that now and I'm not going to use that. I guess my answer to that is, though, that if that's happening, then your tools need work and your tools need developing to cater for that market that are going off in that direction. And I can't see a world in which FPL sites like Scout don't evolve into that sort of thing. Because, I mean, Mark built Rate My Team tool when he first joined Scout, in like 2008 or whatever it was. And that was points projections. That's what it was. It was using data to make point projections. It didn't have the sophistication of lines and optimization and all the stuff we're seeing now, but in its most basic form, it was a points projector tool, which was what the tools use. So I'd be very surprised if tools don't evolve like something like Scout or Hub even more. I mean, Hub obviously have the AI stuff, but if they don't move more in the direction of something like these solvers, because I think it's too big a market to ignore.
You have your own spreadsheet process that you sometimes use to determine the quality of a transfer. Can you tell us a bit about how that works and how you develop it?
Well, it's similar to a lot of these tools.
Or are you contractually prevented from discussing your own spreadsheet?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I probably need to check that with the higher ups at Scout. I mean, the spreadsheet was. I mean, just so everyone's aware, this is a very you're comparing the most sophisticated models in Review and Solo and Scout and Hub to like me at an Excel with an Excel sheet. There's no comparison really. But what I want to start doing more is just sense checking decisions, and that is what the models give you the ability to do. Check your decisions, how they compare to other moves that are being made. We know when we're trying to predict who's going to get returns, we know what factors into it. There's things like the eye test. Are they playing well? Are they making good runs? Are they getting into dangerous positions? That sort of stuff doesn't really get picked up on the stats side and still is important. So you can factor that in and weight that in a certain way. But then things like XG, like are they on set pieces? Do they take penalties? Is the team performing well? Do they have good fixtures? All of these things are, really important. And I think particularly what I've struggled with in the past is knowing when to take a player out of my team. Not necessarily who to bring in. I know who are good players to bring in, but is it the right time to take a player out? Transfers are so valuable. Free transfers, building up free transfers is now more important than I think it's ever been in FPL. And I've probably been too patient with players over the years when I clearly need to have sold them. But on the flip side, I've probably also been too impatient with certain players and sold them before they hit a good run of form. And it's quite useful just to see when I put in all these different variables, and the spreadsheet says, do you know what? That's probably good. That's a good time to sell them.
Yeah.
And if they go on and score back-to-back hat tricks, at least you can look back at that and say, yeah, but all the signs pointed against that happening. And that's what I like. I like that ability to see whether or not it was the right thing to do in that moment.
I feel like one of the things this season that I'm doing is like, if I'm wanting to sell a player, they often tend to be the most sold player of the week quite a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And then I just think, well, if everyone's selling him, that we know what's happening this season, I'll just keep him an extra week. And then, I've got a 13-pointer off Voltamada from doing that. And
you look at Thiago. Isn't he? The thing is, when players are like the most sold player of the week, you've got to remember that the only way they're going to be the most sold is if they were one of the most owned players at some point. And why does a player become the most owned? More than likely because they were a good pick, because they had good stats, because they were on set pieces, because they took penalties. And
then you remember that the highest owned player at the start of the game was Joao Pedro, and you wonder what the hell's gone on.
Well, that is true. He did well though, didn't he? He did well for 4 or 5 weeks.
He did well until I got him in. I suppose that's what a lot of people think. Yeah. Right, so we'll move on a bit from the projection models, because there's a lot more I want to talk to you about. The BlackBox is one of the highest profile channels in the FPL space, and it is one which inspires strong emotions, both from the supporters of the channel and from your naysayers. How does it affect you emotionally to underperform like you have in the last 3 seasons, knowing that you have to explore your perceived failures in such detail every week, and knowing that a sizable element of the community seems to enjoy your struggles?
Great question. I do want, if I wasn't making content, I do wonder if I would play, if I would do a Steve-O and just quit or take a year out.
I've got a question about Steve-O after, so come on.
Or just, or just take a bit of a pause, because there have been times when I've had multiple weekends in a row ruined by FPL. And it's, on paper, it's a pathetic thing to say. You would talk to people who didn't understand it and they'd be like, what are you talking about? But I always compare it to like, if you got really into golf and you spent ages practicing golf and you went and you did like 3 tournaments in a row and you were terrible in every single one, that would ruin your every one of those weekends, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think FPL is that different in terms of a hobby. The only difference is, I think if you practice golf, you will see an improvement steadily. Whereas with FPL, it's not guaranteed, because you can play the game perfectly and still do crap, right? Because of the luck, of the luck and the variance element. I've struggled with it in some ways, because trying to get motivated to do a stream when you've had another red arrow and talk about it and go through all those emotions again is a challenge. But I'm so lucky that the BlackBox community generally is amazing. Like the chat, the people who message me afterwards, the amount of messages I've had this season for people saying, just so you know, I know you're doing really badly. Like, your rank doesn't matter. We love listening to you and Andy talk. We love listening to you and Mark talk about things. It makes it more relatable for some people as well, because not everyone is doing really well. With respect, like, if you're listening to FPL Harry every week for emotional, like, you know,
what are you saying about Harry? Like,
well, you're not going to get it, are you? Because he's like top 5k every week, and if you're a million in the world, you listen to Harry tell you how, you know, how he's had a really tough game week because he's got like 85 points and you've got like 30. It can be a bit different. So it's nice to be a part of a channel where so many people have messaged me and said it sort of helped them deal with, you know, with bad weekends and with red arrows, because they sort of realise we are a community and you can't have a good week every week. And I think, you know, if you watched really good people every week talk about how good they are, I think it would make it harder for you to deal with those bad weeks.
Yeah, I mean, like, that sort of thing, it can just make you feel like, what's the point in even playing if all you're seeing is great people doing it? It's like if you were watching if you're playing chess and all you do is watch the Grandmasters, you're going to think, you know, how on earth
I'm never going to get that. I'm never getting to that level.
You know, whereas for a lot of people, it's about the journey. And I mean, that's what I try and do with my content. It's about trying to become a better player. It's about trying to become the world champion. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I want to be the world champ. And this is what I like about these conversations, about learning things and taking different perspectives in from people who are better at the game than me to become better myself, and hoping people follow me on the journey. You know, when I do my walking videos and I'm ranting and raving in my shed at 2 a.m, and, you know, that sort of thing, I'm hoping people buy into the journey. And I think that's what they do with you and with Mark over the years as well. It's not just about, they see you as like a friend, really. You know.
And I think what you get on, you know, I'm doing the Q&A with Sam on Scout at the moment, and I'm 2.4 million. She's like 2.8 million or something like that. And you get the odd people that come on and they go, you know, why the hell are we listening to these two people talk about, you know, why should we take advice from these two people? And it's like, well, the Q&A isn't, I know it's called the Q&A, but it's meant to be like a light-hearted, like, we'll answer some questions, we'll chat, we'll have a bit of a laugh and all that. And you can still make content, you can still talk about things without it being tied into your rank. Like, a lot of what Andy and I talk about on BlackBox isn't us telling you what to do. I mean, I don't think we'd ever try and do that. We have opinions on who we think are good picks and things, but we present stats, we talk about, you know, who's got good fixtures, we talk about key talking points and things like that. And then it's up to you to do with that whatever you want to do with it. We're not trying to tell you, you know, what to do. And that's never been what BlackBox has been about. So
people will blame you, though.
Oh, of course they will, and of course they will, and you know, rightly so. If I go on and say Barco is going to be, you know, the next best thing in the world, and he doesn't start game week 1, then I'm rightly ridiculed for it. And you know, you do have to have a bit of a thick skin sometimes with things. And like I said earlier, I think sometimes people do go a bit too far with criticism, and, you know, can get quite personal and things like that. But it's supposed to be like, it's like how I see FPL and has always seen it is, it's like if you go down the pub with your mates and one of you brings in a player and he's an absolute flop, you laugh about it.
Yeah.
You don't start attacking them for it, do you? You know, oh, you're absolute rubbish, in a horrible way. You do it in a jokey way. And I think the majority of people get that and do that. You just get the odd person who takes it too far and makes it toxic. And the toxic side of things is a real problem that I think is growing and will continue to grow. But on the whole, it's a good community, and I'm still pleased to be a part of it.
How do you deal with the toxic side of things? Like when you're getting targeted and people are calling you out as a person rather than as an FPL manager?
It's not easy because I think the majority of times you sort of, it's very, oh, well, they're sad, they're pathetic. What's that saying? It's like, why should I respect the opinion of someone I wouldn't want to swap places with or something like that? Yeah. These people are in, people who are doing it, I don't think can be happy with their lives. Like you just don't spend all your time trolling people online if you are living a rich and fulfilled life. So I do feel sorry for them in a way, but sometimes it can catch you at a bad moment. Like FPL isn't my life. Like I'm in a relationship. I've got like elderly parents. I've got a job. I've got, a dog with some like health issues. Like, you know what I mean? And sometimes when these things add up and you have a bad FPL week and then you go on Twitter and then you've got someone, saying you're useless and why is he being called an expert on the FPL show and all that, it can just be the straw that breaks the camel's back in a way. And
you shouldn't really need an escape from the escapism.
Well, exactly. FPL is supposed to be the escape, and I think because FPL is now tied into, like, when I was working because I worked at Scout for 2 years, and I just found it too much. Like it was too much to have FPL as the hobby, the job. It took up all of my time, and then it got to the weekend and I was burnt out from talking about it, and then I had to watch football, and then I had a bad week, and then I'm going on Twitter, and it's like every single thing, just sucks at that point. So I made the right decision to move away from that, but it is still such a big part of my life that it can affect you, and like any hobby can when you put that much time into it.
Yeah, of course. As someone who is part of an Ensemble show, the FPL podcast for me, with other content creators, I know I'll start again because I'm reading this off the screen and I've just read that with a terrible cadence, and I'm a bit embarrassed, but this is an honest channel and I'll leave it in for people to laugh
again. Let's do the hour and a half.
As someone who is part of an Ensemble show, the FPL podcast with other content creators, I know for me it impacts my performance and it amplifies my emotions relating to my results. Is that something you experience too with the BlackBox, and how do you manage it if so?
Yeah, I think we spoke about that a bit earlier, didn't we? I mean, I think it's, if I was to pick a single biggest reason as to why I've struggled, over the last 5 years, it would be that. It would be the fact that I've tried to be different sometimes for the sake of it. I also think I've tried to pull in too many different like ideas and not really focused on one. So I've tried to stay with the eye test and pick players I think look good. I've tried to be a bit different and go ultimate risk on the Trout model. I've always used models a little bit. Like I've always used review a bit, just when I'm struggling a bit to work out what to do. Well, used it. I've used it a bit to see what it suggests, and then I've always gone, nah, I don't like that. But I've never really committed to any approach. And then when I added in the now I'm trying to be different because I don't want to be the same as everyone else and be different to Mark. It limits your decision making because you're going against review, you're going against what Mark's doing, you're not bringing a player because they become template, and suddenly your pool of good players is massively narrowing because you're having to find someone a bit different, and then the chance of that player doing well is a lot lower. So that's what I'm trying to correct, and that's what I have been trying to correct in the last few weeks is just not really do that as much, and let's see how that goes.
Do you find it harder to do the BlackBox if you've had a bad game week, or if one of your co-hosts has had a great game week and they're going to be lording it over you all week for 2 hours?
No, I don't think so, because I think it's good content, and this is what I mean. I think it always comes back to how good you think the content is, and I think if I've had a bad week and Andy's had a really good week, or Andy's had a really bad week and I've had a really good week, you're kind of like, well, it's going to be quite fun to discuss this because you like when Andy's had a bad week and you go, right, Andy, 21 points, how did it go? And you just see, oh, it's been so bad, and you're like, well, I got 71 points, I quite that's the dynamic you like, and there's always a bit of give and take. It's sometimes he's going to have a good week, sometimes I'm going to have a good week. That's the nature of doing these things together. What is difficult is when you have 18 bad weeks in a row. And it becomes a bit of a pity party because you're just on the show. You're like, yeah, it didn't go great again. You know, here it is, blah, blah, blah. And you're sort of trying to defend yourself a little bit because, you know, maybe you felt like got a bit unlucky with stuff, but your rank's really low and things don't improve. So I've struggled for motivation for some streams when it's gone poorly, but I'd say on the whole, if I have a bad week and someone else had a good week, I quite like that in a way.
My wife has no interest in FPL or football itself. Your partner, Yelena, on the other hand, is heavily invested in both, and she has her own excellent YouTube channel. Yelena has kicked your ass at the game 3 years running, and she is ahead of you this season too. As one of the higher profile FPL personalities, how does being the second best player in your own house affect your confidence and emotions?
She's going to love that as well. She's going to love all of that. Do you know what? We are competitive with it together, and you know there is a sense of, you know, I want to beat you every year, but neither of us have been great for a while. Like, I mean, she finished in the top 100k a few years ago. I've been nowhere near that in the last 4 years, and I think genuinely at the moment we both just want each other to do quite well. So the worst result is us both doing quite badly and her winning, which is exactly what happened last year.
I do enjoy the zooms on the vlogs into your face.
She loves the dramatic. She's
excellent at them.
Yeah, the thing is, because it affects us so much in the house, it's not nice to see. You know, she had a really bad week the other week and she was quite down about it. And I was just like, do you know what? I've been there so many times. I'm not going to rub it in your face and be a massive dick about it, because when it's happened to me, you've been quite supportive. So I think it's quite nice in the way, because we quite acknowledge that when it's a bad week, the other person's going to feel a bit crap, and you do relate to it. Whereas if you're, I don't know what it's like with your wife, but if you have a bad game week and you try to say to her, you know, oh, I only got 17 points this week, Gordon got sent off, is there a chance you just be like, get over it?
There's very much that chance, but
rightly so in a lot of ways.
But this is why I do my walking videos as well, because if something goes terrible, it's like, fair enough, I get a good video out of it, but also I get out of the house in the fresh air and I clear my head a bit and I do my rant and my rave, and by the end of them I realise what a preposterous man I have become to be so overly emotional about such a simple spreadsheet game. It's like, sometimes you got to think, it's like, you know, you've lost the Champions League on Football Manager, so you're going to have a tantrum in the house with everyone, fall out with everyone heard. It's like, it's not that much different, really. But
it would happen. It would happen with Mark and I quite a lot, actually, in the sense that one of us would be like, not really feeling the stream tonight. You know, maybe we've had a bad game week, or, you know, we've had a bad week at work or whatever. But by the time you finish it, you're like, do you know what? I really enjoyed that. Yeah. We talked about football. We had a bit of a laugh. The community was asking some really funny, saying some really funny things in the chat. And I don't know, it sort of helps you.
It does.
That's what I mean. Doing the content has definitely helped me deal with stuff, because I don't think I'd probably be playing it if I wasn't so involved.
Yeah, and certainly with the Ensemble shows, it's that connection that, you know, it is part of a community. Like, you know, for me, I don't really get out into the world all that much. It's not a priority of mine to do so, if I'm completely honest. But this game actually helps me to stay connected with other people and to have these conversations like we're having now. And it's good for me to discuss my emotions. Like, if I am feeling crap and I go on Pubcast and, you know, I have a bit of a rant about it or what have you, I do feel better afterwards. Or if I do a solo video and then people are in the comments and maybe they're taking the mickey, or maybe they're being a bit more encouraging or what have you, and it does help to me.
I think people focus on the negatives of like the FPL community a lot, in terms of, you know, what we talked about earlier in terms of like monetization and growth and, you know, people in the space doing the same things. But ultimately what it leads to is the game growing. And as the game grows, the community grows. And as the community grows, you get things like Fest and Meets, and you've got more chance of actually making like real life friends that you want to talk to and hang out with and, engage with. And I think for a lot of people, you're not alone in that, in the sense that, you maybe don't get out too much or whatever, but you get a lot of the social side from FPL and the community. Yeah. And you can't really have it both ways, because if you say, I hate content creators and I want them all to go away and I want it all to go back to how it was in 2008. Well, in 2008, there wasn't a community. There wasn't what we've got now. Yeah. So you'd be taking that away and stripping it back. And I think people forget about that at times.
No, I certainly don't want to take that away. I love it. I love the banter. I love the rivalries, and I love the connection it gives me with I'm in a WhatsApp group and I'm talking to a lad from Australia, a lad from New Zealand, a lad from Canada, and then two lads from down south, and we're talking all day pretty much about a game that we all love.
Making the game more accessible makes the pool of people playing it wider, and so increases the chance that you can meet people like that and form connections with them. So it's not all bad. I'm trying, that's the positive spin on it. It's not all bad.
No, I think it's a wonderful game. I do. And it's easy to say. Is it like you say? It's easy to focus on the negatives, and maybe I've done that a bit with the questions today. But like for every kind of troll online, or for every kind of piss taker that gets it wrong, and doesn't sense the tone that you're feeling. Because I do think sometimes it's just people trying to have banter and not realising that you don't know them the way they know you.
I completely agree. I think a lot of the people who I have run-ins with are people who I think are just being a bit overfamiliar. They've watched you for a while and they think they sort of know you, but maybe they catch you at sort of a bit of a bad moment, and then you buy it. And then a lot of the time when you actually reply to a comment, they come back and say, oh shit, sorry, I didn't mean to offend you, or didn't mean it like that. And then you're like, oh yeah, it just didn't come across like that because it's a YouTube comment and you can't put the tone into it, and I don't know who you are. But the majority of people are well-intentioned.
I think so. I do. I think people just want to feel part of something as well.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, I agree.
Earlier, I referenced your despondency towards your performance, which you discussed on the BlackBox a few weeks ago. Recently, one of the long-standing members of the FPL YouTube community, Steve-O from Elite FPL, who you mentioned earlier and ruined my question, he walked away from the game entirely, deleting his team and quitting his successful channel. In your lowest moments, how close have you come to doing the same, and what is it that stopped you?
My lowest moment with the game was a couple of years ago when I was doing badly, which I've been for the last few years, but I sold Ollie Watkins because he was yellow flagged, and I bought Darwin Núñez, and Ollie Watkins got a brace and Núñez blanked, predictably. And that is the only time I can remember thinking, screw this, I'm just going to stop playing. That is but that is genuinely the only time. And I don't know what it was about that particular one, but that one really, really hurt. And I've had loads of similar things since, but I've never really seriously considered doing it. If the channel massively tanked in terms of numbers, and say I lost my ties with Scout because I've been talking about Solo on this stream and they've decided they're a competitor and they're going to sack me, whatever.
I can press a bleep button over the Solo all the time.
Or, if there was a reason why I couldn't do BlackBox anymore is kind of the point I'm trying to make. Or, for whatever reason, then I would probably consider it, because I do think my enjoyment of FPL is completely tied into making content now. Yeah. But as long as BlackBox is going and people are still watching it and enjoying it, I'll keep doing it.
That's a nice answer, But I will come back to that in a moment. In fact, no, I'll come back to that. No, I won't. I'll carry on my train of thought because I've got questions and they kind of follow one into each other. So I will stick with them. And there have been times in the past where other big name content creators have been criticised both for their choices in playing the game, but also how they operate their YouTube channels and their brands. You are a good man and you defend these people as their friend, as any good man would do. However, some people suggest this runs deeper than friendship and they imply your intentions are more insidious. How do you respond to accusations there is an FPL content creator cartel
Oh my God.
who use their reach and power to constrain the choices of the masses in order to benefit themselves and their FPL teams, and who actively seek to silence and discredit smaller content creators who challenge the orthodox choices and behaviours of more established names?
I think it's incredible that people genuinely believe, and I've seen it, they genuinely believe there is this like WhatsApp group with us all in, I'm in the WhatsApp group with Holly Shand and Bakar and everyone, and we all get team leaks and we share them between us, and then we make moves off the back of that. I mean, what happens is, people like Andy, for example, has got hundreds of thousands of followers, and the chances of someone watching him who has some connection to Liverpool, for example, are massively heightened than someone who's got 10 followers called Dave on Twitter. So yes. The difficult thing with that has always been, what do you do with that information? If you get what you think is there's two things. One, if you get a fairly credible bit of information, do you share it? And I think the majority of people do. If you watch the deadline streams, when people get something they think is genuine, they share it. And I know Andy does all the time, let's talk. But what do you do when you get a non-credible bit of information? And I think a lot of the cartel stuff happened around the Walkergate incident, when a lot of people had bought in Walker, and Mark was on them. He bought in Walker and benched him. And that's because there was like and it wasn't part of a big WhatsApp group. I think Luke even shared it with us. He said, I know a guy who knows a guy who said Walker's pissed off Pep and he's not going to be in the squad. Yeah. And I remember like Mark said to him in the chat, he was like, well, how sure are you on that? And he's like, well, he's been right like 3 out of 3 times in the past. And it's like, well, do you share that information? Do you cause like a mass panic about Walker not playing when you're not even sure and you're just hearing it on the grapevine from someone else? But is it also enough for you to go, do you know what? It's my own team and I'll choose to trust it and make my decision. There's definitely a line with it. And I think I would err on the side of sharing that information if I had it. I think that happened very, very close to the deadline. I think if it had been an hour before, I think Mark probably would have gone on Twitter and said, I've decided I bought in Walker this week. I'm going to bench him because I've heard this thing. Do with that what you want. But this happened like 5 minutes before the deadline. Like you've got to think about your own team first before you can even go out and process it. So anyway, that's just an anecdotal example. There isn't a WhatsApp group between us. I think we, as content creators and people who do things like the FPL show together and go on streams together, we know each other quite well. So I know Focal well, I know Harry well, I know Janny well. And I'm going to defend them against people who insult their character because I know their character is pure and genuine. And when I hear people saying they're doing certain things because of certain reasons that I know fundamentally aren't true, obviously I'm going to stand up for them. And that isn't because I'm trying to protect my own interests. It's because I know them as a person. I don't want to see them drag through the mud because it's not fair. There's other people who I wouldn't necessarily do that for. Like I don't know FPL Salah very well. So I wouldn't jump to his defense in the same way that maybe I'd jump to some other people because I don't know him. And in the same way I wouldn't do that. But if I did know him well, then I would do the same thing. So that's where a lot of the defense of people comes from, is the fact that we know each other quite well and we don't want to see reputations ruined over things that aren't true.
When you see somebody do something that you know is going to lead to this sort of a kick-off of people, do you kind of like, how do you feel when you see that, when you see the kind of the groundswell of negativity start to rise? How do you feel in yourself? What makes you think, right, I need to get involved here?
I think that the pylons really annoy me. They wind me up more than I think anything else in the community, because it feels like sometimes people are just looking for any excuse to be negative about something, and as soon as something happens, you get the same people jumping on it and trying to create something out of it, and it winds me up because I don't I don't like the fact that people use something like social media to spread negativity and not just enjoy something.
Yeah.
Like, the FPL community is there to be enjoyed. We should be laughing about things with each other. We should be having fun. We should be creating good memories and enjoying it, not spending time trying to bring people down and drag people down. I mean, sometimes people do need a sense check and something. And there's been examples of when something's been called out where I think, do you know what? Fair enough. They've done something wrong. You've called it out. You've had your say. I respect that. But what you don't need is just personal attacks, constant criticism, constant retweeting, constant reposting, deliberately posting things just to get a reaction from certain people to go into the pile on even more. That's when it's just, I just don't agree with that at all. You can have your say without being a dick, basically.
I agree. Like, sometimes you'll see people and they'll be like, oh, I think this person's wrong in what they've done here. And you think that's fair enough. And then, like, they'll say, what do you think? And they'll tag other people. Yeah. And
engagement. It's engagement. A lot of it's engagement, I mean.
Well, it is. And it's, some would cynically say it's to kind of increase their standing with a different audience.
Yep.
And that's what I don't like. Like, to me, when I look at it and I see you getting involved in all these kind of
I can't help myself. I just can't help myself.
Yeah, but you would. If like my mate was on Twitter and like the world started going at him because he said something, I'd be standing up for him as well, if like, because when you're on the end of that, like, it's horrible. It does feel horrible when you feel like you can't open your phone without having 100 messages of abuse of a bad joke. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I like, it's not something I've ever really bought into, like this whole FPL Cartel thing, because to me, it just makes sense that you're mates with these people and you're going to talk about it with them. Like, you look at Harry and Oscar and Raptor, and they've got they've got their own channel and they do a lot of things together. Of course they're going to talk about the game. But I don't know, for me, I don't know, I find it all
people
who
use like the toxicity as like a clout for like their own growth and engagement, I think are scumbags. There's no other way to put it. I just think if you thrive in a negative environment like that and that's how you want to showcase yourself and that's what you want to like be a part of, I just think you're a scumbag. I don't think there's any excuse for it. I just think you need to have a real look at yourself and what you actually want from life and social. And unfortunately, it just seems like there's more and more people who fall into that trap. And I don't think there's any. I don't think it's, I think it's because life is hard at the moment and lots of people are struggling like with lots of different things, financially, stress wise, job market's terrible, economy's like in a wreck, and you people do get some kind of statistic pleasure, I think, from bringing other people down who they don't see regularly. Yeah. But if you are in that like mindset, then you need to sort yourself out and maybe step away from social, because it's not going to make your life any better.
No, I agree. And I think it's easy to forget, like, when you see someone on a screen, it's easy to forget that the real person behind it, But anyway, to follow up on this a bit, you mentioned Mark there with the Kyle Walker thing. From what you know, how much influence does Mark have over the game in his new role? And how does it feel when you see people criticising your friend personally for decisions which he may not have any influence over?
I feel for him because Mark is a sensitive soul and he takes criticism to heart, and he took the Walker thing really hard and he stopped doing videos for a bit and everything like that. I mean, in terms of his own influence, I mean, he has got an influence on things. That's why he's been brought in there. I think he is the best possible person they could have brought into that role to help advise on decision making. I don't think something like the assistant manager chip would have come in if Mark had been there, because he would have just immediately vetoed it and said, this isn't FPL, this is something completely different. I think he's done well with things like the assist rule. He had an influence in that, simplifying that, taking away the subjectivity of things. I know people still aren't happy with it. There's no perfect solution. Believe me, I've chatted to him about it for hours. There's no perfect solution, but I actually think where it is now is probably, it's the best it's been, at least. He will always lose power over something like Opta, because Opta is what drives so many things that happen in FPL, from BPS to DEFCON to everything. I know a lot of people at the moment are upset because the window for the DEFCON points being added is different on certain days, and if it comes after a certain time, they don't update it. That is something that I think he needs to push and address and work on. But the actual, what constitutes as a DEFCON has nothing to do with Mark. Yeah. So when people say, oh, Anderson got that extra DEFCON in the update because Mark owns him in his team, it's just complete nonsense, because he doesn't have any say over what Opta classify as a clearance, block, or interception. And I think a lot of the criticism that people get about, oh, well, they haven't given Bruno Guimaraes that assist because no one owns him from the cartel. It's like, no, they haven't given the assist because Opta have deemed that it's not an assist. It's nothing to do with the community. I think people think that content creators have a lot of power over the game, and they have zero. They have zero. The only person with any semblance of control over things is Mark, and he hasn't got as much as people think, because all he does is have ideas and has to go into a boardroom and has to sell that idea to a load of people, and often he can't do it.
Right. That's quite interesting, that, because I feel like, well, obviously nobody really knows what his role is in any real detail, but I feel like the problem he has is it's easy to project onto him.
Yeah.
You see a lot of the time, if a controversial assist goes one way or the other, is Mark got him in his team? Let's see. And is there any truth to that?
No, absolutely not. Because again, Mark doesn't have. Mark is so proud of FPL, because I think he obviously gets credit from a lot of people, but I've had arguments with people where they say, oh, Mark Sutherns, what's he ever done for the game? Mark is one of the main reasons why FPL is as big as it is. I mean, maybe not one of the main reasons, but he's a significant factor in why FPL is as big. And I think particularly with the community,
yes,
in terms of creating a community, he was the first person to create an FPL community, back in 2008. So yeah, he gets a lot of that, and then people saying that. But yeah, I think he was sort of brought in. I think one of his roles in the job is to be a bit of a scapegoat.
Yeah,
because he's a public figure that people know, and I think the Premier League probably like the fact that people can focus that attention on him rather than on them.
Do you not think they should let him talk publicly? To me. Yep. I feel like that is his biggest strength. If he could go on to a podcast and explain this stuff himself, rather than all this kind of third-party Chinese whispers, he said, she said stuff, it would make it a lot better. For me, I think, I said it at the time on the late tackle, I thought it was crazy to me that they didn't just take your entire podcast and make that the official FPL podcast or what have you, because why wouldn't you? Why would you? I was
really disappointed when I found out he couldn't carry on doing BlackBox. And I was more disappointed when I found out he couldn't do anything, because firstly, I know Mark, I know how much he loves making content and doing stuff like BlackBox and things like that. But also I think it's a massive shame for the community that he can't, because I don't think there are many people that understand the game better than him. And I think the way he explains things, and he's in a group chat, I'm in a group chat with him and a few other people, and some people kick off on that group chat in the same way you see on Twitter, why is that not being an assist, blah blah blah, and Mark will just write a paragraph and just say, well, it's not an assist because this has happened, blah blah blah, and they'll go, oh yeah, okay, fair enough. And it's like, well, why aren't you doing that publicly? But it's because the Premier League don't want to, for whatever reason. I can't I can't say, but they don't want that transparency about.
We all know
things.
that the reason is because the more people kick off, the more they're talking about the game. And you know, let's be real. Yeah. You know, they love it. It's controversy creates cash.
Yeah. Yeah, you could well be right, but yeah, it is a big shame. I think. Well, I mean, you say that though, but then if controversy creates cash, you would think having him doing BlackBox, where we talk about FPL, could create that chaos, right? Because the reason they don't want him doing it, from what I understand, is they're worried that he could talk about a rule or something in like a negative way, and then it could bring disrepute to the game. But if he did that, it would cause conversation.
Like Scout with reviewer.
Well, exactly. Yeah. There's lots of different things and lots of different factors that go into it. I'm sure it's not just as black and white as that, but
is that why he's allowed to do the Planet FPL correspondent?
Yeah, because that's football related rather than FPL. I mean, there's obviously still a bit of a tie to would you get him in your team or whatever, but there's no danger of him talking about a dodgy assist or something like that or that wasn't given. But my take on it was always, he could tell me what he could and couldn't talk about each week. And I could just not, like, if he said, I don't want to talk about that assist, from the week, I'd be like, okay, we won't talk about it. It was a shame that it was such a blanket no, because I think we could have worked around whatever rules and regs they had. But
I mean, you'd think they'd let him do like a half-hour recorded show that they could.
Yeah, I know. But yeah, I can't really comment on it because I don't know. I don't know why they wouldn't. But yeah, I would like to hope in the future he could come back in some capacity and do content again, because I think the community is a worse place without him doing that.
Oh, definitely. We talked about this briefly when you had me on the late tackle, but now more time has passed. How are you finding doing the BlackBox without him?
Yeah, I mean, it hasn't helped that the season's been so rough. I've enjoyed being more in control and charge.
Do you think you would have had a better season if Mark was there?
No. I don't think I've played any differently to how I would have done if he'd been around. Like I said, my intention was always to have a good season, and I set my team up in a way I thought I would achieve that, and it hasn't worked. I miss Mark. I miss doing it with Mark because I love streaming with Mark, and Andy is the only person Andy and Luke are the only people who I would be able to do that with and have that same relationship with. I think Andy doing the Scout cast as well has been a little bit challenging in a way, because he sort of talks about stuff and then we have to do another podcast, and I can understand why that splits viewers a little bit, but I've never found it to be a problem when we're talking, because I think the shows are quite different anyway. But I've enjoyed being in charge of like doing the stats and doing the tables. I've had to really learn how to use Excel to like create all the tables and learn things like macros and formatting and all that stuff, which I just left all that to Mark. Like he would be the only person. And when he went away or wouldn't do an episode, I would be screwed because I didn't know how to do any of it. Whereas now I've sort of learned skills to help me do that. And, I got the channel rebranded and I work with a designer on that. And it's been quite nice having that ownership of everything. It feels like sort of my channel now. Not to take away from Luke and Andy, but like, they sort of turn up and do the episodes and
the hired help.
The hired help, yeah. Whereas Mark and I felt more like it was our channel together, whereas it sort of feels like it's more my channel and I've got great people who assist and support it, which I like. It was originally set up as my channel, and then Mark came on board, and now it's sort of gone back to that. But yeah, I do miss the conversations with Mark, because I just like listening to him and how he played the game, and we had a really good friendship by the end of the 5 years. So it is sad.
I actually did wonder how much of that Morgan Gibbs-White captaincy was to do with genuinely thinking he was a good option, and how much of it was wanting to feel connected to Mark.
Oh yeah, let's go with that. Thing. Yeah, let's go with that. Yeah, I always knew deep down it was a terrible, terrible idea. He was playing West Ham at home though. Come on, I still don't think it was that bad. It was him or Fernandez, wasn't it? They were the only ones.
Well, he scored the penalty against him in the reverse fixture, hasn't he?
I know.
Typical.
It's typical, isn't it? It's literally a dagger through the heart, that one. Oh. He was awful in that game. I captained him. Absolutely dreadful. And
yeah.
But,
I often read stories of the wrestler Ric Flair and how when he was in WCW, he was bereft of confidence and struggling quite a lot. And how he came to WWE and Triple H was pivotal in rebuilding his confidence and guiding him back to the top. It may not be a perfect analogy, but I see elements of that with you and Mark in the way he was struggling. And then he came into the black box and you helped him so much. And now he is one of the leading authorities in the game. And I feel you deserve much credit for your role in that. And I want to bring the conversation back to FPL more directly now, because my interpretation is that you are in that Ric Flair position at the minute and you're one of the best, but you no longer maybe believe it of yourself in the way you once did. But the thing is, mate, I believe it of you.
Oh,
I believe you can.
My Triple H.
I believe you can get back to that top 5k, maybe not this season, but next season without a doubt. And there are a lot of people out there who believe the same and who are rooting for you, because if you can do it, then so can we. I'm struggling this year and I believe I can still win the game next season. And if I can believe that, so should you. The question for us and for those watching in similar positions is this: what can we do this season in order to be ready to attack next season and re-establish ourselves among the elite of the game?
Oh, what a question. I like the fact that I got compared to Triple H and Ric Flair in that, two of my like wrestling idols growing up in my teens. I think it's really hard to give advice because, like we say, so much of this game does depend on luck. And I could tell you to stick to one strategy, and then next year is the year when the models don't work, and it is all about the eye test and things like that. So, I think what you need to do though is decide how you want to play the game and what your targets and are in that. I mean, do you want to completely change the way you play the game just to get a good finish? Like, do you want to religiously stick to what the models are saying? And if you do that, you're probably going to get a top 100k finish. I think that's pretty that's pretty much guaranteed.
Gary from the Pubcast shows that every season.
Yeah, but if you want to win it, you can't just do that. You're going to need to take more risks and things like that. What I would urge everyone to do though is just don't do what I do and close yourself off to certain things. I closed myself off too much to getting too invested in models, for example. I think I got too involved in trying to be different and not consider like good template picks and things like that. I think it's all about keeping your options open and picking the best options from what you've got available, and not just discrediting things because you don't feel like you want to go down that path. But it is easier said than done. It's a really, really tough game to do really well at the moment, and maybe you just need to have a bit of a recalibration into what is a really good season, because a few years ago I'd have said anything other than a top 10k was basically a disaster, whereas now I think it's 100k. I think 100k is sort of the new top 10k. So all you can do is take it week for week and try and make the best decisions you can, and use the black box model. Look at the decisions you're making and just make sure you think they are good decisions. And if they're not good decisions, that's probably why you're doing crap. And if they are good decisions and you're doing crap, that's just variance, baby, as Luke would say.
I think that's a good way to end the conversation. So, in fact, no, to end it on a positive note, what is your favourite memory from FPL and how has it enriched your life?
There's loads of great memories of I mean, in terms of like FPL generally, I mean, probably the first fest was probably my best moment of being involved in FPL. I just loved seeing the whole community come together in a way that I'd never seen before. People interactive, people coming on their own and getting into groups and then talking about things, a shared passion with people. Like personally, like being invited onto the FPL show and doing that with like James Richardson, who I always used to watch when I was a kid, and like Jules Breach, and seeing like where she is now. Like I'll always hold those memories really, really highly. Every episode I've done of BlackBox, I'm happy I've done, because I think it's given at least one person an element of like joy, or like have enjoyed it, and I love being a part of that. So they're kind of like the main ones. In terms of like specific FPL moments, the Bruno Guimaraes captaincy is the best one. And that's the thing, right? If you religiously stick to a model and you always do what the solve says, you don't have moments like that. And I don't want to fully turn into someone who doesn't see a player and think, do you know what? I really think they're going to do well this week, and pick them. And, you know, if Gibbs White had done well that week and got a brace against West Ham, we'd be talking on this show now about how, you know, what an amazing move it was. Yeah. It didn't work, but it's created a story, right? It's created a moment. And I still think FPL has, you know, it's 38 weeks. You can play, you know, you can aim to play really, really well, but don't forget to every now and then have a bit of fun with it, because it's still a game at the end of the day that we should enjoy.
I mean, I often think it's a game that we focus so much on the outcomes, but really the outcomes are such a small part of it.
Yeah.
Because, like, if you captain someone in the last game of the game week and, you know, they go and get a red card and leave you ranked 9.8 million in the world, as somebody might have experienced, it's over. Once the game week's over, you're back to thinking of the next game week. Yep. How can I adapt? How can I? And for me, it's that strategy that is the fun part of it. You know, how can I get from this position to this position? What is the way? And that takes up far more of my time than, you know, oh, Anthony Gordon got a red card, and you know, it does. You know, and. But
something like that. That's about as bad as it gets in terms of FPL, right? In terms of like pure points wise, captaining a player like that who gets sent off in a game. But that will be something that you remember about FPL for the rest of the time that you play it, because it is a moment. It's exciting.
It's one of my favourite memories.
Exactly, that's what I mean.
It sounds stupid.
Exactly, it's completely stupid.
You know.
Yeah, all you've got to do to be successful at FPL is make more good decisions than bad decisions. And what that means is you can afford to make the odd bad decision. You just got to make up for it later down the line by making a couple of good ones. No. So, yeah, have a bit of fun with it. But ultimately, you know, we all want to do well, and it is tied into our moods. And, yeah, you want to be making more good decisions than bad ones.
I'll ask one more question. And then I'll let you get away to watch the football. As an expert of psychology and philosophy, what lessons from those fields can we apply to FPL in order to improve both our performance, our analysis, and our emotion management?
Yeah, I mean, I do get this a lot, actually. It's a bit like that. Oh, you study psychology, you must be a mind reader or something like that. It's like, oh no, I studied research on like media violence effects. I don't know about all the big, you know, psychological like implications of certain things. What I do know, and the biggest thing that I have with FPL, and I think a lot of people have, which maybe they don't realise they're having, is the sunk cost fallacy. You buy a player, you are determined to prove to the world that that player is a good player and is a good pick, even though every single thing points to the fact that they're not, and you should sell and count your losses. But you don't, you stick with them week after week after week, and they blank and they blank and they blank. And yeah, that is definitely something that because I am just a stubborn person by nature. I don't like to admit mistakes. Yeah. And the thought of selling a player and then they do well is horrible. And Calvert-Lewin is the perfect example of that. But really, you know, I had sunk the cost into him. I mean, it was a bit different with him because he was sort of a bench player I had. But say you buy him in as a player you're going to be playing every week. After he's blanked 3 or 4 times in a row and everyone's mocking you for bringing him in, you look at the things, you go, you know what, actually, they're probably right. He probably is a bit crap, and then you sell him. But you can. I would just be like, no, do you know what? I'm going to keep playing him until he eventually scores. It went on for a bit too long, unfortunately, before we finally did well. But I think that's the main one.
Or not quite long enough.
Or not exactly, or not quite long enough. I should have just kept him for that extra 2 weeks. Yeah. But again, you know, and this is where whether you use a spreadsheet or you use like Scout or you use the models, whatever, as long as you can, I genuinely think it helps you mentally to rationalize these decisions that you're making. And if you choose to sell a player, you know, because of all these different factors, you know, you say you've got a checkbox list, and you're like, did he do this? That's what I use the spreadsheet for. Have they hit these certain criterias? Then it's time to sell. And then if you sell and he does well, it's like, well, that's annoying, but come on, like he he wasn't hitting these things. So that's why I like something like that to help me with that decision.
So is there anything you would like to leave the viewing audience with? Any final thoughts?
I think we've covered quite a range. I think like my main thing is always don't beat yourself up for feeling bad about FPL, because if you're like me and you invest a lot of time into it and a lot of effort, it's very hard to, to not deal with those emotions. But at the same time, recognize when it is becoming a problem. Like if it is some, like what helps me sometimes is some weekends, and I just won't watch any football at all, and we'll just watch match of the day, in the evening. Won't make a big song and dance about it. We won't check scores or anything like that. And then you sort of isolate it all into one horrible hour window rather than all day. And sometimes that can be quite healthy, because if you feel like every weekend you're not sleeping and you're wasting your weekend watching things that you're not enjoying, sometimes it can be time to take a bit of a step back. So it's all about emotional regulation and things. Don't beat yourself up, but at the same time, identify when you might need to take steps to help you feel better.
I would highly advise a strategic siesta, especially if you're going against a Haaland captaincy. Just go for a sleep during the match, wake up and take all the bad news in one hit.
Absolutely. the watching a game and waiting for the bad thing to happen is so much worse than just checking your phone and being like, oh, it happened. It was always going to happen. But that 90 minutes of pain is...
Do you know what? It's funny you say that, because I'm working towards a 5 at the back system, and I'm just realising that's going to be my entire weekend every weekend.
Fun. At least you've got DEFCON though, so at least they could hit that before.
This is it. This is it. But right, thank you very much, Az, and really appreciate you coming on the channel today. And I look forward to seeing you on the FPL Black Box in the future.
I look forward to seeing you on the FPL Black Box in the future, Andrew.
You chat,
a good one. Thanks for having me on. Really enjoyed it.
So there we have it, a fantastic conversation which I am very grateful for, and I tell you, I could have easily kept going for another hour or more. I was very impressed with Az's openness and candour, and especially how he told me to publish this video unedited. I hope you have enjoyed it, and I am interested to know your views in the comments and whether you want these conversations to continue. I know I do, and hopefully they can become a regular thing on the channel, because I feel like they're improving me as an FPL manager and I am learning a lot from them. Please give the channel a subscribe so you can catch the next one, and let me end by saying thank you for watching, and we will see you next time.